In the 1970s, Bowie taught us that being different required courage. In the 1980s, he showed us what success could look like. But in the 2000s, without anyone knowing, he was teaching an entirely different lesson. Humanity is lived quietly. Our generation remembers everything: the birth of Ziggy, the Berlin period, the triumph of Let's Dance. But none of us knew that every single week, Bowie was waking up for someone who wasn't famous. There was no Instagram, no Twitter, no culture of do good and share it. He just did it. Because doing the right thing didn't require applause. Michael was 65 years old when they first met, around our age. A Vietnam veteran, PTSD sufferer, one of society's forgotten people. Maybe there's someone like that in your neighborhood too. Maybe you don't see them either. But Bowie saw him. And for 15 years, outside the fame games, he built a real friendship. What does this story tell us? Perhaps the greatest legacy isn't stage performances. It's how we behave when nobody's watching. Bowie knew this, and even after death, he gave us one final lesson. If you want to discover more stories about the human side of David Bowie that the world never saw, subscribe to our channel. Because behind every legend, there's an untold story. And sometimes, the most beautiful ones are the quietest. Lafayette Street, Lower Manhattan. 2001. The city was still recovering from September's wounds. On the corner of Lafayette and East 4th Street, there was a man who'd been sitting in the same spot for 3 years. His name was Michael Patterson, though most people who passed him daily didn't know that. To them, he was invisible. Michael was 71 years old. He'd served 2 tours in Vietnam, come home in 1973 with medals and nightmares. By 1998, the street was all he had left. His spot on Lafayette became his entire world: a sleeping bag, a cardboard sign, and a coffee cup for spare change. People walked past Michael every day, thousands of them. Most looked through him as if he were made of glass. Nobody, in 3 years, had sat down beside him. Until one Tuesday morning in October, when a man in a simple black coat and gray beanie approached, carrying 2 large coffees and a paper bag from the bakery down the street. Michael didn't recognize him at first. The man wasn't wearing elaborate costumes or dramatic makeup. He was just a person. "Mind if I sit here?" the man asked. Michael, confused but not threatened, nodded. The man sat down, handed Michael one of the coffees, and opened the paper bag to reveal 2 bagels with cream cheese. "I'm David," he said simply. "I live a few blocks from here. Thought you might like some company." They sat together for 20 minutes that first morning. David asked a few questions about how long Michael had been on the street, where he was from originally. Michael, suspicious of charity that came with strings attached, answered cautiously. But there was something different about this David person. He didn't have that look of pity and discomfort. He didn't take photographs. He didn't ask if Michael had tried getting a job. He just sat there, drank his coffee, shared the quiet. When David stood to leave, he said something Michael would remember forever. "I'll be back next Tuesday, same time, if you'd like the company." And then he was gone. Michael assumed it was a one-time thing, but the following Tuesday, at exactly 7:30 in the morning, David appeared again. Same coat, same beanie, 2 coffees, 2 bagels. This continued for a month, then 2 months, then a year. Every single Tuesday, without fail, David would appear. Michael slowly began to trust this strange ritual and look forward to Tuesday mornings. By 2003, the Tuesday morning meetings had become the anchor of Michael's week. They'd evolved beyond simple coffee sharing. David had started staying longer, sometimes 45 minutes, sometimes over an hour. They talked about everything and nothing. Michael shared stories from Vietnam, from his childhood in Pennsylvania, from the life he'd had before the street. David listened with an intensity that Michael had forgotten people were capable of. David rarely spoke about his own life in specific terms. He mentioned having a daughter. He talked about music sometimes, about how creativity felt like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. They discovered a shared love of science fiction. David brought Michael a worn paperback copy of Stranger in a Strange Land one Tuesday, and the following week, they discussed it like two college students in a literature seminar. But here's what made their friendship extraordinary. David never once mentioned who he was. He never said, "I'm David Bowie" or "I'm a musician," or gave any indication that he was one of the most famous people on the planet. To Michael, David was just a kind neighbor who treated him like a human being. Michael didn't own a television. He hadn't listened to a radio in years. He had no idea that the gentle man with the graying hair who bought him coffee every Tuesday was the same person who'd created Ziggy Stardust, who'd sung Heroes, who'd sold hundreds of millions of albums worldwide. David was just David, the only person in New York City who saw Michael Patterson. There were close calls. One Tuesday morning in 2004, a young woman walking past did a double-take when she saw David sitting on the sidewalk. She stopped, stared, pulled out her phone. David noticed and very calmly stood up, walked over to her, and spoke quietly. Michael couldn't hear the conversation, but the woman's eyes went wide. She nodded several times, put her phone away, and hurried off. David returned to his spot beside Michael and continued their conversation about whether Dylan or Cohen was the better poet. Later, Michael would learn that David had made her a request. "This is my private time with a friend. Please don't photograph this. Some things should remain human, not documented." And remarkably, the woman honored that request. But why did David keep it secret? The answer came one Tuesday in 2006, when Michael asked him directly. They'd been sitting together for 5 years by then. "David, why do you keep coming here? You could send someone else. You could just give me money. Why sit here every week?" David was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "Because I need this as much as you do, Michael. Maybe more. My life is complicated, full of people who want something from me, who see a version of me that I created decades ago. They don't see David Jones, but you do. You're one of the only people left who knows me as just David. That's a gift. This isn't charity. This is friendship." Michael understood then. They were both invisible in different ways. Michael because society refused to see him. David because society saw too much of the wrong thing. In those Tuesday morning meetings, they were just two men sharing coffee and conversation. And in a world obsessed with image and fame, that had become revolutionary. What Michael didn't tell David for many years was that he saved every single coffee cup from their Tuesday meetings. By 2010, he had over 400 flattened paper cups, each one marked with the date in pencil. But more than the cups, Michael treasured the notes. It started in 2007, when David had to miss a Tuesday for the first time in 6 years. He was traveling, unavoidable, but he didn't just disappear. On Monday night, a courier delivered an envelope to Michael's corner. Inside was a handwritten letter from David apologizing for missing their meeting, a $50 bill for breakfast, and a promise that he'd be back the following week. The letter ended with a sentence that made Michael cry. "You matter to me, Michael, Don't ever doubt that. From then on, whenever David traveled, a letter would arrive. Sometimes short, sometimes longer. David writing about cities he was visiting, museums he'd seen, thoughts about art or music. He wrote the way he talked, as if writing to an old friend, which of course he was. Michael kept every letter in a small metal lockbox. By 2015, there were 73 letters. Some were on hotel stationery from Tokyo, London, Berlin. All were written in David's distinctive handwriting, precise but flowing. In 2008, David gave Michael a gift that changed everything. He arrived one Tuesday with a backpack. "I've been thinking about our conversations," David said, "about how you used to love photography before the war. I want you to have this." He pulled out a Polaroid camera. "This was mine. I've taken thousands of pictures with it. Now I want you to take some." Michael protested. David had answers. He'd arranged a small storage locker in Michael's name, paid for a year in advance, where Michael could keep things safely. "Whatever you see that the rest of us miss, you notice things, Michael. Show me what you see." For the next 7 years, Michael became a photographer again. He documented Lafayette Street like an anthropologist. And yes, he photographed David too. Not as Bowie, but as his friend David. Sitting together on the corner, both holding coffee cups, both smiling at some shared joke. Michael took one photo every Tuesday, building a visual diary of their 15-year relationship. But beyond the photos and letters, there was something else. David had a habit of writing things on napkins, song lyrics, random thoughts. Michael would retrieve those napkins after David left. One, from 2014, was different. It was written carefully. "Being seen is everyone's right. You are seen, Michael. Never forget that." Michael folded that napkin and kept it in his pocket every single day. When the nightmares came, when the isolation felt too heavy, he'd take out that napkin and read those words. Coming from David, who knew what it meant to be looked at by millions, but truly seen by almost no one, those words carried weight. 2012 was a hard year for Michael. The winter was brutal, and at 82 years old, his body wasn't recovering from the cold. He developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. He didn't tell David at first, but David noticed immediately. "You're seeing a doctor," David said. "Today. Right now." David made a phone call, and within an hour, a car arrived to take Michael to a private clinic. The doctor diagnosed pneumonia. "You need to be admitted. This is serious." Michael started to leave, knowing he couldn't afford hospitalization. The doctor put a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Patterson, everything is already taken care of." He spent 11 days in a private room with a view of the East River. David visited every single day, not just Tuesdays. He brought books, sat beside Michael's bed, read aloud when Michael was too tired. When Michael was discharged, David had another surprise. He'd arranged for Michael to spend the remainder of winter in a residence hotel. Warm, clean, safe. Just until spring. "But I can't watch you freeze to death out there, Michael." Michael stayed in that hotel room for 3 months. David continued their Tuesday meetings, now in the hotel's lobby instead of on the sidewalk. When spring came, Michael went back to his corner, not because he had to, but because it was home. David understood. He never judged. He just kept showing up every Tuesday. But something had shifted. They were both in their 80s now. How many more Tuesdays did they have? Their conversations became more reflective, more philosophical. They talked about regrets, about what mattered, about what they'd learned. In 2013, David arrived one Tuesday looking tired. Finally, he said, "Michael, I need to tell you something. I haven't been entirely honest with you. I haven't told you what I do for a living." Michael laughed with relief. "David, I know who you are. I've known for years." David looked genuinely shocked. "How?" Michael smiled. "About 5 years ago, a young kid came by my corner playing guitar. When he took a break, I asked what he was playing. He said, 'Bowie covers, man,' and showed me videos on his phone." David sat in stunned silence. "Why didn't you say anything?" Michael shrugged. "Because you didn't want me to. You came here to be David, not Bowie. And honestly, it doesn't change anything. You're still the guy who brings me coffee. You're still my friend." David's eyes filled with tears. He hugged Michael right there on the sidewalk. "Thank you for seeing me." 2015, 14 years of Tuesday mornings, over 700 meetings. They'd been friends longer than some marriages lasted, but age was catching up. Their meetings became shorter because their bodies demanded rest. Still, neither suggested stopping. In October, David arrived with something other than coffee. A small wrapped package. "Happy friendship anniversary. 14 years today. October 13th, 2001. Inside was a leather-bound journal and an expensive pen. The first page had an inscription, "For Michael Patterson, who taught me that friendship doesn't require an audience. Write your story. The world should know you existed." Michael found himself unable to write for weeks. But one Tuesday in November, David gently pushed. "Your story matters, Michael. You survived a war. You survived decades on these streets. You maintained your dignity in a world that tried to strip it from you. And you gave me something I couldn't find anywhere else." That night, Michael opened the journal and began to write. He wrote every night for 2 months. Sometimes David would ask about his progress, and Michael would share excerpts. "This is good, Michael. When you're finished, I want to help you get it published." On December 29th, 2015, David arrived for what would be their second-to-last Tuesday ever. Michael didn't know that. David looked tired. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I'm going to miss next Tuesday, and possibly the Tuesday after. I have some health things I need to attend to. Nothing dramatic, just maintenance." Michael felt cold fear. "Is it serious?" David was quiet, then said, "I don't know yet, but I promise as soon as I can, I'll be back. In the meantime, I've arranged for someone to come by every Tuesday. His name is Robert." They sat together for an hour that morning, longer than usual. They didn't talk much, just shared comfortable silence. When David finally stood to leave, he did something he'd never done. He took out his phone and asked if he could take a photo of them together. "Why now?" Michael asked. David smiled sadly. "Because some moments deserve to be remembered." Then he hugged Michael, held on perhaps a beat longer than usual, and walked away into the winter morning. January 5th, 2016, a Tuesday. A man named Robert appeared at Michael's corner carrying coffee and bagels. "I'm a friend of David's. He wanted to make sure you had breakfast." Michael accepted gratefully, but felt David's absence like a physical weight. Sunday, January 10th. Michael was approached by a woman from a homeless outreach program. She was crying. "I'm so sorry. Do you know someone named David? I was told to find you and tell you he passed away. Today." Michael didn't understand at first, but the woman showed him her phone. David Bowie dead at 69, and Michael's world collapsed. For 14 years, he'd been sharing coffee with one of the most famous musicians in the world. The next days were a blur. The world mourned. Tributes poured in from celebrities, world leaders, millions of fans. And Michael sat on his corner on Lafayette Street, alone with his grief, unknown and unseen by the masses who claimed to love the man Michael had actually known. But word spread. A journalist found Michael. "Is it true you were friends with Bowie?" Michael nodded. "Every Tuesday for 14 years. He brought me coffee, we talked." The journalist asked if she could write about it. Michael remembered what David had said. "Your story matters. Yes, but tell the truth. That for 14 years, one of the most famous men in the world sat on a sidewalk with someone society had made invisible, and they were just two friends sharing coffee. No cameras, no publicity, no agenda. Just human decency." The article went viral within hours. Suddenly, Michael Patterson was the most talked-about person on the internet. The irony wasn't lost on Michael. It took David's death for the world to finally see him. Robert returned to Michael's corner a week after the funeral with an envelope and a request. Before he died, David left instructions. "He wanted me to give you this and arrange for you to have stable housing if you'd accept it." Inside was a letter, the last David would ever write. Michael's hands shook as he read, "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm sorry. I wanted more Tuesdays. You gave me something I'd been searching for my entire adult life. You let me be ordinary. In a world that turned me into an idea, you saw David Jones. Please accept the housing arrangement. Please finish your journal. Please remember, being seen is everyone's right. You saw me, Michael. Thank you. Your friend, David." David had purchased a small studio apartment in Michael's name, fully paid. There was also a modest trust fund. Michael moved in 2 weeks later, and every Tuesday morning, he walked back to Lafayette Street, bought coffee and a bagel, and sat on their corner for exactly 1 hour. His way of keeping the friendship alive. The lockbox, that small metal container Michael had guarded for years, became the key to David's final wish. Inside were 73 letters, 400 coffee cups marked with dates, dozens of napkins with David's thoughts, and every Polaroid photo. A complete archive of a relationship the world had never known existed. A publisher created a book, Tuesday Mornings, 14 Years with David Jones. It became a bestseller, not because of celebrity, but because it told a story about humanity that transcended fame. All proceeds beyond Michael's modest needs went to organizations serving homeless veterans. David didn't help me to make himself look good. He helped me because it was the right thing to do. Michael lived in his apartment for 3 more years after David's death. He continued his Tuesday ritual, always sitting on their corner from 7:30 to 8:30. In 2019, the city installed a small commemorative plaque. This corner witnessed 14 years of friendship between two men who proved that human dignity transcends circumstance. May we all see each other as clearly. Michael died peacefully in 2020. He was 90 years old. In his will, Michael left the lockbox to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with one condition: display it alongside information about veteran homelessness. Don't let this become just another celebrity artifact. Let it mean something. The coffee cups, those 400 flattened pieces of paper, Michael left to David's daughter. She should know that her father was more than Ziggy Stardust. He was a man who showed up every week for 14 years for no reason except friendship. The corner has become an unofficial pilgrimage site. The nearby bakery now offers free coffee and bagels to homeless individuals every Tuesday morning in honor of the tradition. It's what David would want. For 14 years, David Bowie performed one of the most radical acts imaginable in our attention-obsessed age. He showed up consistently for someone who could give him nothing in return. No career boost, no publicity, just friendship. We live in a time when charity has become performance, when doing good requires documentation. We've forgotten how to help without broadcasting. But Bowie understood something we've lost. The most meaningful acts are the ones nobody sees. Their friendship challenges our assumptions about value and worth. Michael had no wealth, fame, or status. By society's metrics, he was worthless. But to David Bowie, Michael Patterson was worth 14 years of Tuesday mornings. Worth the risk of exposure. Worth, ultimately, provision of a home and security. Perhaps worth isn't about what you achieve, but about the connections you maintain. Perhaps the most valuable thing any of us can do is show up consistently for another human being and say through our presence, "You matter." Our generation witnessed Bowie's evolution from Ziggy to Black Star. But this quiet commitment to a homeless veteran might be his most radical transformation. From icon to human, from performer to friend, from Bowie to David. There's a photograph from 2011 that captures something essential. David and Michael sitting side by side, laughing at something, completely unself-conscious. You can't tell who is the rock star and who is the homeless veteran. Just two old men sharing pure joy. That photograph shows what we've lost and desperately need to reclaim. The ability to connect across the chasms our society creates. Michael's journal includes an entry from December 2015. People ask what it was like being friends with David Bowie. But I wasn't friends with David Bowie. I was friends with David Jones. Bowie was the performance. David was the man who showed up every Tuesday and treated me like I mattered. That distinction matters. We idolize celebrities, but rarely see them as humans who long for ordinary connection. Bowie spent his career being extraordinary, but what he protected fiercely every Tuesday was the chance to be ordinary, to sit with a friend and talk about nothing important. Their friendship was mutual salvation. David saved Michael from invisibility. Michael saved David from untouchability. Together, they created a space where they could both be human. Who are we not seeing? Who walks past us daily, invisible? And when do we get to be seen for who we really are? David Bowie, who built a career on transformation, found authentic space with Michael Patterson, who'd lost everything society considers valuable. That's recognition. Two people who understood that connection requires vulnerability and courage to cross social boundaries. Every Tuesday for 14 years, David Bowie performed his greatest act. He showed up as himself. And Michael Patterson, invisible to thousands, was seen completely by the one person who mattered. That simple exchange, "I see you, you see me," that's what saved them both. The world mourned David Bowie, but Michael mourned David Jones, the friend who brought coffee, who asked about dreams, who sat on cold concrete because friendship matters more than fame. That's the legacy worth remembering. The commitment, the consistency, the choice, repeated hundreds of times, to show up for someone the world had forgotten, to bring coffee and stay for an hour, to be present, to be human, to be, above all else, a friend. David Bowie taught us many things, but maybe his most important lesson was taught on a sidewalk to an audience of one every Tuesday for 14 years. Being seen is everyone's right. You are seen. Never forget that.